I stood on the graduation stage, lights blinding, applause roaring, and 3 empty seats burning holes in the crowd. My phone vibrated once. No congratulations, no apology. My parents skipped my graduation to fix my sister's tantrum. In that moment, I understood something terrifying. Love in my family was conditional. I smiled for photos, walked back to my seat alone, and folded my gown that night in silence. I didn't argue. I didn't confront anyone. I quietly made a choice that felt small, almost invisible. What I didn't know was that this quiet decision would expose secrets and leave my parents desperate for the truth. My name is Quinn Carter, and for most of my life I was known as the easy one, the strong one, the daughter who didn't need much. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Detroit, in a house that looked calm from the outside neatly trimmed lawn family photos by the entryway, a dining table polished every Sunday. Inside, though everything revolved around my older sister Vanessa, my parents' pride and constant concern. Vanessa was always described as fragile, emotional, someone who needed extra care. My parents said it so often it became law. If she was upset, plans changed. If she wanted something, everyone adjusted. I learned early that peace in our house came from giving way. So I did. I learned how to smile and step back. I learned how to be invisible without disappearing. When I was little, birthdays told the story best. Vanessa's were loud and elaborate balloons brushing the ceiling, restaurant tables filled with relatives, laughter spilling into the parking lot. Mine were quieter. A store-bought cake, a rushed hug. "We'll do something bigger next year," my mom would say, already glancing at her phone. Next year never came. At dinner, I'd reach for the last piece of chicken and hear my dad clear his throat. "Leave it for your sister," he'd say gently, like it was advice, not a command. "You don't need much. You're strong." I believed him. I believed that being strong meant asking for less. School became my refuge. I worked hard, not because I wanted praise, but because achievement felt like proof that I existed. When I brought home awards, my parents nodded like it was expected. "That's great, Quinn," my mom would say already, turning to ask Vanessa how her day went. When Vanessa had a bad one, everything else stopped. Still, I held on to one quiet hope. Graduation. I told myself that moment would be different. 4 years of late nights, part-time work, endless stress surely that earned me a seat in their attention. I imagined them in the crowd, my mom crying, my dad clapping too loudly. I imagined finally being chosen. That hope is what made the empty seats hurt so much. And it's why, as I stood there smiling for strangers, I didn't just feel abandoned. I felt foolish for believing things might change. The truth is, the cancellation didn't come out of nowhere. It arrived the way everything else in my life had, with a warning I chose to ignore. The night before my graduation, my phone lit up with my mom's name. Her voice was low and rushed the way it always got when Vanessa was involved. "Honey, your sister's not doing well," she said. "She's overwhelmed, emotional. We might need to stay back tonight. Stay back, not we'll try our best. Not we'll be there for you." Just a soft suggestion, like my graduation was a flexible appointment that could be moved around her mood. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my folded gown laid out for the morning. "It's just one day," I said carefully. "It only happens once." There was a pause. Then my mom sighed. "You know how she is, Quinn. You're strong. You'll understand." That sentence landed heavier than any argument ever could. You're strong. It wasn't comfort. It was a verdict. I told myself they'd still come. I told myself they'd figure it out in the morning. Vanessa always had storms like this, and somehow the world always kept spinning. Surely this time would be different. The morning of graduation, the house felt unnaturally quiet. No calls, no updates. I dressed alone, adjusted my cap in the mirror, and tried to ignore the tightness in my chest. When I texted to ask where they were, the reply came quickly and without emotion. "We can't make it. Your sister needs us." That was it. No explanation, no pride, no apology. Standing in the stadium hours later, I watched other families lean across rows to wave, to shout names, to hold up phones. I felt the heat of the sun on my shoulders and the cold clarity settling in my bones. This wasn't about an emergency. This was about hierarchy. And I knew exactly where I stood in it. As I walked back to my seat after my name was called, something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was quieter than that. Like a door closing. I thought about every time I'd waited patiently, every time I'd told myself love would show up if I earned it, every time I'd accepted being second as long as it meant keeping the peace. That night alone in my apartment, I replayed the message again and again. Your sister needs us. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I'd never dared to ask before. What if this never changes? I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I opened my closet, pulled out an old suitcase, and set it on the floor. Because in that moment, I finally understood something that terrified me. If I stayed, I would keep disappearing. I didn't announce my decision. I didn't write a long message or demand an explanation. I woke up early the next morning and let the quiet do the talking. The apartment felt smaller than usual, like it was holding its breath with me. I packed slowly, a few sweaters, my laptop. A stack of notebooks from school pages still creased from late nights. I paused at a framed photo from years ago, me and my grandfather on a porch, his arm resting lightly on my shoulder. I slipped it into my bag and zipped the suitcase shut. I drove west with the radio off. The road hummed beneath the tires, steady and indifferent. By the time I reached Grand Rapids, the knot in my chest had loosened into something colder and clearer. My grandfather opened the door before I knocked, as if he'd been waiting. He didn't ask questions right away. He just set a mug of coffee in front of me and let me breathe. Over the next few days, the silence from my parents was loud. No calls asking where I was, no concern. Then the messages started not about me, but about money. A bill that didn't go through, a payment that was overdue. The tone shifted from casual to anxious, from confident to panicked. That's when my grandfather finally spoke. He told me he'd been helping for years, quietly. Covering payments. Taking care of bills when my parents came up short. He said it like it was a simple fact, not a confession. He believed he was keeping the family steady. He believed they were taking care of both daughters equally. I felt something crack, not from pain this time, but from clarity. The stability I grew up with hadn't been earned. It had been borrowed. And the way they treated me suddenly made sense. It's easier to ignore the child you think will survive. My phone buzzed again. Another message asking if I'd seen the account or moved anything by mistake. I typed nothing. I set the phone face down on the table. That night, my grandfather and I sat on the porch as the sky dimmed. He told me he was done stepping in, done fixing what he didn't break. They'll have to stand on their own, he said quietly. For the first time, I realized my leaving wasn't just an escape. It was a shift, a weight removed, a support pulled away. And somewhere between the crickets and the cooling air, I understood this wasn't just about distance anymore. It was about consequences finally catching up. The shift didn't happen all at once. It unraveled in stages the way something unstable always does when the pressure holding it together disappears. At first, the messages from my parents were careful, polite, almost casual. Hey, did you change anything with the payments? Something didn't go through, just checking. I didn't respond. I wasn't playing games. I just knew that if I answered one question, it would open the door to 100 more, all circling the same truth they weren't ready to face. 2 days later, the tone changed. My mom called 3 times in one afternoon. When I finally listened to the voicemail, her voice sounded tight, stretched thin. She talked fast, like she always did when she was trying to stay calm for Vanessa. We're just a little confused, she said. Some bills are overdue. Your father thought maybe you saw something. You're good with details. Good with details. Even now, I was being cast as the helper, the fixer, the quiet one who made things work behind the scenes. That night, my grandfather asked me to sit with him at the kitchen table. He didn't rush. He didn't soften his words either. I told them I'm stepping back. He said, "No more covering payments, no more fixing their mess." I stared at the grain of the wood, the way the light caught the worn edges. They're going to panic. He nodded once. They already are. The panic hit them faster than I expected. By the end of the week, my dad showed up at my grandfather's house without warning. He stood on the porch, hands shoved deep into his pockets, jaw tight. He looked smaller somehow, less certain. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't invite him in. We stayed right there, the door open behind me, the late afternoon air heavy and still. "What's going on?" he asked, though his eyes already knew. "Things are falling apart. We're behind on everything." I waited. I needed to hear what he would say next. He exhaled sharply. "Your sister's been having a hard time. You know that. We didn't mean to hurt you." There it was, the familiar script. Explanation without accountability. "You didn't miss a meeting," I said quietly. "You missed my graduation." His face hardened. "That again. We said we'd celebrate later." I felt something steady in my chest, not anger, not sadness, just certainty. "You always say later." He scoffed, shaking his head. "You're being dramatic. Families make sacrifices." For who, I asked. The question hung between us. He didn't answer. That evening, Vanessa made sure her voice was heard. She showed up where she knew I couldn't avoid her, outside the campus library, right as students were pouring out for the day. Her hair was perfectly styled, her expression already arranged for an audience. "You really did this," she said loudly, folding her arms. "Mom's a wreck. Dad doesn't sleep, and it's because of you." People slowed down, watched. I didn't look away. "Because I moved out, because you abandoned us," she snapped. "You knew they depended on that support. You knew how fragile things were." Fragile. That word again. Always used to protect her. Never used for me. "You skipped my graduation," I said evenly. "That was your choice." Her eyes flashed. I needed them. I was falling apart. "And I wasn't?" "I asked." She laughed, sharp and dismissive. "You're always fine. You've always been fine." Something in me settled into place. "That's the lie you've been living off." Her voice rose. "You're selfish. You couldn't just wait. You had to make this about you." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "I made it about reality. You're an adult, so am I. And I'm done paying for your comfort." She stared at me stunned, not because I was cruel, but because I wasn't bending. A few students lingered nearby, pretending not to listen. Vanessa noticed. Her expression shifted, smoothing into something wounded. "You're tearing this family apart," she said louder now. "You'll regret this." I didn't raise my voice. If the family falls apart because one person stopped carrying it, then it was never strong to begin with. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she had no script. The final confrontation came that weekend. My parents called a family talk at the house in Detroit. I agreed to come, but only because my grandfather insisted on coming with me. Not to rescue, to witness. The living room looked the same. Framed photos, neatly arranged furniture, the illusion of order. My mom started crying before anyone sat down. "We don't understand why you're doing this," she said. "After everything we've done for you." I glanced at my grandfather. He remained silent, watching. "You didn't come to my graduation," I said. "You didn't even apologize." My dad slammed his hand against the arm of the couch. "Because we were dealing with a crisis." "A tantrum," I corrected. "That you chose over me." Vanessa scoffed. "You're exaggerating." "No," my grandfather said calmly, speaking for the first time. The room stilled. "She's finally telling the truth." They turned to him, startled. "I've been covering your payments for years," he continued. "I believed I was helping both of my granddaughters. What I see now is that I was enabling favoritism." My mom's face drained of color. "Dad, you don't understand. I understand perfectly," he said. "You took her strength for granted. You used it as an excuse to neglect her." My dad stood up. "So what? You're just cutting us off, letting everything collapse." My grandfather's voice was steady. "I'm letting you face the consequences of your choices." The room erupted, accusations, defensiveness. Vanessa crying loudly this time, demanding to know how she was supposed to cope. I waited until the noise burned itself out. "I'm not here to negotiate," I said. "I'm here to be clear." They looked at me. "I didn't leave to punish you," I continued. "I left because staying was destroying me. I won't move back. I won't fix things for you, and I won't be guilted into carrying what was never mine to hold." My mom whispered, So you're choosing this over your family? I met her gaze. I'm choosing myself for the first time. Silence fell heavy and final. As we walked out, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Behind us, the perfect picture cracked. And this time, I didn't turn around to save it. The fallout didn't explode. It eroded. Over the next few weeks, the messages slowed, then stopped. The panic gave way to exhaustion. Bills stacked up. Plans were quietly canceled. The neighbors who once waved now looked away. Vanessa's crises no longer drew a crowd. Without someone smoothing things over, they lost their power. I stayed in Grand Rapids. Life became smaller and steadier. Mornings with coffee and quiet. Evenings with notes spread across the table, my grandfather reading nearby. I went back to my work in psychology with a focus I'd never had before. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove I deserved a seat at anyone's table. I already had one. One afternoon, my mom sent a single message, not an apology, just a question about whether I'd come by sometime. I didn't answer. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Silence, I'd learned, can be a boundary. My grandfather never said I told you so. He didn't need to. He just smiled when he saw me breathe easier, laugh more easily, sleep through the night. You did the right thing, he said once, even when it was hard. He was right. The justice wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was simple. The life they built on imbalance couldn't stand once I stopped holding it up. And in the quiet that followed, I finally felt something I'd never known before. Peace. Walking away didn't make me heartless. It made me whole. I learned that self-respect isn't betrayal and silence isn't weakness. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop shrinking for people who never planned to grow with you. If this story felt familiar, if you've ever been pushed aside in your own family, know this: you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. And if you want to hear more real family drama like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.